This is Anavong's CSE 335 Phase 3 class project video. The name of my application was Beauty Org. For my application idea, I wanted to fulfill my beauty-related needs all in one place. I found that I was quite a disorganized shopper, and I often found myself forgetting to buy things, buying things that I already owned, buying the wrong things, or becoming quickly overwhelmed by my beauty collection as it built up. I wanted to be able to store data of makeup that I already owned and be able to update it, store a shopping list and be able to update it, so adding and deleting and editing, store my clothing measurements and be able to update them, be able to view nearby donation centers, and finally be able to view beauty-related news. This is my UML class diagram. I had one main view controller that simply had the name of the application and a start button on it. Once the user tapped the start button, it would lead to a tabbed controller. The first tab was a makeup view that was a collection view controller. It, of course, had a collection view cell and used a separate class, makeups, as the model for the makeup that the user owned. If a makeup item was clicked, it would lead to a detail view that obviously displayed the details of the makeup owned. The second tab was a shopping list view, which was a table view controller. It, of course, had a table view cell and used a separate class, items, as the model for the items of the user's shopping list. The third tab was clothes view that displayed the user's clothing measurements. The measurements included the user's waist, bust, hips, and inseam measurements. The fourth tab was called Map View that had an MK map view that displayed the donation centers near a location. There was a news button that would lead to the news view that displayed beauty-related news in a UI text view. This is my MVC diagram. My view would display the makeup owned, the shopping list, the clothing measurements, the map of donation centers and beauty-related news. It would respond to user interaction and notify the controller. The controller would send the user's updates to the model for storage. It would handle the tabs of the tab controller and interactions, and call the API for the news. The model would then store that data in core data, manipulate the data if needed, like translating the core data into Swift related data, and vice versa. It would then notify the controller of updates for the data. The controller would then fetch the meaningful data and then update the view accordingly. This project had a significant amount of input validation for all of the inputs, so it was capable of being quite robust in that respect. The project was capable of storing and editing the makeup owned by the user. It stored the name of the makeup, a description of the makeup, which could include the shade name or the user's feelings toward the makeup, and an image of the makeup that could be retrieved through the camera or the photo library. It stored the makeup owned in a collection view. When an item was tapped, it showed a detailed view that displayed the name of the makeup, a bigger image of the makeup, and a description of the makeup. The project could store and edit a shopping list in a table view that would display each item in the shopping list and its quantity. The project could store clothing measurements and allowed the user to update the measurements as needed. The project could display a map of nearby donation centers after the user entered their location that they were searching in. The project could display news that is relevant to beauty. Since this project was quite straightforward to me, the limitations of it laid within the API call. Only the title and an incomplete description of the news were displayed. It was also only for one date. If I were to redo this project, I would allow the user to input a date or perhaps attain the current date somehow so that the news would stay updated and relevant. For my lessons learned, I found working with Xcode to be quite fun compared to other IDEs. It reminded me that coding, of course, results in real things like mobile apps, which sounds obvious, but can be easy to forget. I realized that there is truly infinite potential when it comes to the possibilities of products that can be created given the tools that we have. I was reminded of the importance of program architecture and program robustness. Being forced to use MVC architecture so much made me realize that organizing my code well can make it much easier to edit the code and to diagnose errors. Being able to validate user input with the alert controllers was particularly fun for me and just reminded me of the importance of being able to account for anything when it comes to creating a software product. I overall thoroughly enjoyed the class, but when it came to exam time, I found myself not really being sure of what to study or what to put on my cheat sheet. On the exams, there were questions that I never would have thought to account for given just the study guide. I wish that there was more exam material on the course website, or at least links to relevant Apple documentation for us to study. Aside from just the material, we could have had more assignments for the concepts. I found that while I was able to implement core data and API calls with help from the example code and teaching assistants, I feel that my fundamental understanding of these concepts is still quite incomplete. I wish that we had more assignments that exercise our fundamental understanding of these concepts, whether they be in-class exercises or take-home quizzes, because I didn't really know where to go to practice my conceptual understanding.